Dr. Bourla, welcome. It is terrific to have you with us today.
It's a great honor, Susan, to be there with you and to talk to you.
Pfizer made the very bold decision not to participate with the funding from Operation Warp Speed. How did you work your way through all of those very important decision points?
Again, I think it is when you have difficult decisions to make, what you should do is to stick to principles. And the principle that we operate, it is that our purpose is to make breakthroughs that change patients' lives. That's the only way that our shareholders, for example, can benefit. There's no other way. So what we need to always to think it is what's best for patients. And then by doing that, I'm sure that also that will become a good business proposition for them. But always think about what's best for patients. And all these decisions were made with that in mind. And I felt, for example, when we made the decision not to take the money, that speed was of essence. The world needed a vaccine urgently. And I wanted to protect our scientists, not only from the internal bureaucracy, that's why I gave them all the resources that they want and freedom to operate, just talking to me, but also I wanted to protect them from the external bureaucracy. And if you take money from a government, if you take money from taxpayers, those that they give you the money, they want to be part of the decisions, how you're going to spend them. Rightly so. They are not your money. So I didn't want that. I thought that we need to isolate them and move fast. The other thing was that we gave all, as I said, all the resources. And the reason was that the world was in very big trouble. Let's try to remember how the situation was. At that time, it was not given that vaccines would be available. Everything that the way that we knew it was working stopped working. So there was no higher call to action than that. So it was very clear that we will be very dedicated in doing that.
So looking back now, what do you think were the most important factors that drove Pfizer's success in the rapid development of the vaccine?
First of all, I think we have very, very good skills and competencies in developing, in research, in manufacturing. And I think that was something that was necessary. Apparently not sufficient, as you said, but not everybody that had these competencies was able to do something like that. But it was necessary. I think what made the big difference were two things. One was a culture of thinking big, and the other was a sense of purpose. Let me speak a little bit about the first one. When you ask people to do a vaccine in 8 years instead of 10 years, they will find it very challenging. But they will think within the box. They will think within the parameters. They will think, how can we improve the current ways of operating? If you ask people to make, instead of 200 million doses, which is the number of doses we were producing for vaccines in general before the COVID-19 vaccine per year, if you ask them to make 300 million doses, they will find it extremely difficult to jump that much, and particularly for something that we haven't manufactured before. But we didn't ask them to do the vaccine in 8 years. We asked them to do it in 8 months. We didn't ask them to do 300 million doses. We asked them to do 3 billion doses. And it was a very clear commitment that we are not going to back off these very aggressive targets. So that forced people think completely differently, completely out of the box. They rethought and re-engineer every single process of how we do things. And when you throw into that mix two things, one, the sense of purpose, people were dying. So these scientists, they were giving themselves, they were having sleepless nights, days and nights, plus the fact that the company was putting all the resources that were available, money, equipment, people, at their disposal. I think that was what made eventually those two miracles: a vaccine so quickly, that it is very effective and safe, and manufacturing capacity at that degree.
I'm tempted to ask how you as a leader kept morale up amid challenging people to that degree, and also facing, as you said earlier, unprecedented situations with respect to supply shortages, not enough vials, everything else that factored into this equation.
Yeah, and I can build on it. The challenges that people, they don't know were daily. It was not a smooth sailing, and it was ups and downs, and that was daily. I remember that I would say that a good day would be a day that I will have good news that will last at least 2 hours before something bad will happen, because always they were happening. And that was involved from the study, from selection. First of all, shall we do mRNA or not mRNA? And then shall we select candidate A or B? And then shall we do the studies in Argentina or in Brazil or in the America? And then how to manufacture. So there were how to deal with the ultra cold situation that we came with brilliant solutions with these boxes that they have dry eye and we could see. So all of that were, let's say, challenges that we had to face. And challenges, when you have a sense of purpose, they actually is like the wind to the fire. If the fire is small, the wind can put it off. But if the fire is big, it makes, the wind will strengthen it. And I think this is what happened with these challenges. The people had this sense of purpose. They knew that we need to do it. So every time that we had a challenge, they were fighting it, and then they were getting courage from the fact that we're able to overcome this one. So they knew that we will overcome all the others at the end. Now, easier to say than do, but keep in mind that we were operating, all of us, with very high levels of adrenaline. So we were just kept going.
It's a stunning analogy of the fire as the pandemic fire burned all around us. So the development of the mRNA platform underlying both Pfizer's and Moderna's vaccines obviously predates the arrival of SARS-CoV-2, but it's also going to have significant applications for not just future variants of this virus, but for other infectious agents as well. How do you see the potential at this point? If we're back here 10 years from now, what vaccine are we going to be talking about against which infectious agent that you think is now in the realm of the possible that's based on this mRNA platform?
Yes. I think the mRNA platform was the first time that proven tangible clinical outcomes. But as you know, we are working on this for years, and vaccines is not the only application that can have. I would say that let me mention 3 of the most, let's say, promising, most mature at this stage opportunities for a technology like that. One is vaccines, other vaccines. The other is rare diseases that they are genetically created and transmitted. The diseases that they are due to a mistake that someone may have in his DNA code. The other one, it is cancer treatments, cancer vaccines that can attack your tumor. I think multiple companies will go and try their capabilities in all 3 areas. Clearly, we are doing it right now. In terms of vaccines, we have already made known to the world that we are working on a flu vaccine with this mRNA technology. As I said, since 2018, our expertise actually that we had developed during the period 18-19 in building this technology was what gave us the confidence to go for a COVID-19 vaccine with mRNA technology. So other than flu, that we are working on multiple targets, which soon, I hope, we will disclose also to the world that they know what are the targets, but will be other viral and non-viral targets for infectious diseases. But also I think that working on rare diseases in genetic and also working on cancer vaccines, it's the next steps, but they're not far away, actually, they are imminent.
Yes, and we had a conversation yesterday with your colleague in this field, John Maraganore of Alnylam, expressing the same view that the mRNA and the RNAi platform really hold enormous potential, as you described. It's very exciting. Let's turn to some of the immediate issues in the COVID vaccine, boosters and approval for use in children ages 5 to 11. First, on children, your board member, Scott Gottlieb, former FDA commissioner, said over the weekend that trial data is going to be available by the end of this month, and that assuming that FDA moves expeditiously, a vaccine could be approved for use in children ages 5 through 11 by the end of October. Do you agree? Is that the target you foresee as well?
Yes, I can speak about when the studies will have the data done and when we will submit, and that will be indeed by the end of September. I think the data should be, the studies should be completed for kids aged between 5 and 11, so that we can go from all the way to 5 and above. And then we'll submit immediately after they are available. Maybe that will be end of September, maybe the first week of October, but this is the time frame. Then it is up to FDA to take their time and then make the decision. We are working also on younger kids, actually all the way down to 6 months old, between 6 months all the way to 5 years old. And those data will be available a month and a half later. So it will be end of October, beginning of November. And again, those data will be submitted. So that's on kids. On boosters, the application has already been filed. And actually, in a few days, we will have a discussion in the advisory committee of FDA, the VRBAC. That will be on Friday. And I think the package that we have submitted is very robust. And I anticipate there will be a very robust scientific discussion.
And as you know, there's been a lot of debate among scientists about the evidence and a lot of conflict on this issue. The Biden administration, if anything, is leaning more in the direction, has leaned actively in the direction of approving booster use soon, and tells us boosters actually will be available as soon as next week. How do you view this debate over the extent of the evidence, given that obviously Pfizer believes the sufficient evidence exists now to approve use as boosters?
I think the power of science, it is that it can only be accomplished if you have transparent discussion. So I welcome all these discussions, and I welcome the challenges that every scientist should have on data. So there should be a critical eye. I believe that boosters are needed. I believe that the Biden's administration decision is the right one. I believe that the Israelis' decision, the UK's decision, the German decision, and I can go on and on with countries that they have already recommended to have boosters are the right ones. But I'm not the one to make the decisions. I'm the one to submit the evidence so to those that will make the decisions. And I think it is their responsibility to look at the evidence, to ask us the questions that they want to ask us, and then make their decisions. I believe the right thing, based on our scientific analysis, it is that boosters are needed.
Given the enormous efficacy of the existing COVID vaccines against this virus, is Pfizer preparing for the really harrowing possibility of a vaccine-resistant variant developing?
Absolutely. And not only preparing theoretically. We have done it twice so far, and maybe it's not very well known to the people. We have a scientific strategy that we are surveying every single variant that could become available. And then we are testing those variants in multiple very rigorous tests to get an idea if this could escape the immune protection of our vaccine. And when we have what we call variants of concern, which means there are concerns that this may happen, we start immediately developing, before we can prove if we need it or not, a new specialized vaccine. The reason we do that is because you can't take chances to lose 3 months just because you overestimated your ability to cover a vaccine. We did that with the beta vaccine, which was what originally was originated in South Africa. And we developed a vaccine and we tested this vaccine. The good news were that the current vaccine was working very well against beta. Actually, our data were 100% efficacy we saw in South Africa. So we put it on the shelves, but we had it. The same we are doing now with Delta. So the studies are ongoing for Delta. They are not completed as with beta. I don't think we will need it. But at the moment that we started those studies, it was not clear to me and I didn't want to take any chances. So the same will be repeated every time we see a variant of concern. The likelihood that one day we will need it, a new one, I think is there. I think the variant tries to find ways to overcome the resistance, to overcome the measures that humans are taking to avoid it, and one day may come more successful. But good news, we will be there ahead of them. So that's what dedication means, I think.
And we have a lot of letters of the Greek alphabet left to go, as we know, so we'll get there. So let's talk about COVID-19 and equity and access and affordability. And obviously there are many organizations and people now making the argument that booster shots should not be administered in wealthy countries like the United States until more poor countries are able to give even their first doses of vaccines to their populations. What is your perspective and what is Pfizer's perspective on this issue?
I think there are two things that we need to clarify. First of all, a misunderstanding. The fact that US or Europe or whoever decides to give booster doses will not change the allocation of doses that we have promised to different countries. We have promised, and we have already allocated doses, that at least 1 billion doses will go to middle and low-income countries this year in comparison to the 3 approximately that we are going to make this year. That we gave the promise way before the need for boosters and way before someone decides we want boosters or not. We are not going to change that. That's one. They will still receive their 1 billion like if there would not be boosters. And the US and Europe will receive, again, the doses that they have ordered way ahead in time. So that's one. The second, I don't think that the scientists should speak about if we need, if a booster is a scientific necessity or not, based on if we say it is, we may create issues to some other countries, and if we say it is not, we may create issues to some other countries. They need to assess the data on its merit. They need to answer the question, do we need a booster or not? It's not for a scientist to make a decision, but I prefer that more people will disease in US than in another country. It is for all of us to try to bring enough doses for all, but we should not bring up this type of considerations in this type of question, is booster scientifically indicated or not? If boosters are not scientifically indicated, they should say it. And if boosters are scientifically indicated, they should say as well. And then we should try to resolve the issue of those allocations, but not by misguiding about the scientific need or not.
Well, Albert Bourla, first of all, thank you so much to you and your Pfizer colleagues for your support of our organization, Research America. But much more broadly, thank you for the contributions that your company has made to global health in this terrible crisis. You used the analogy a few minutes ago about the wind and the fire. Let me just say, may the wind be at your back and Pfizer's back as we proceed through the rest of this pandemic and beyond. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much.